assume. Now, I know what comes to a lot of people's minds when you say the word assume. And for a lot of people, it's that not so politically correct definition of the word assume. Well, we have this happen in our life all the time. We make assumptions about things. And where I see it most often in what I do is what people assume about the concept of age and the ridiculous concept that time passing on a calendar causes deterioration, which is an absolute lie and it's never been clinically proven. But it got me thinking, instead of looking at time passing on a calendar causing these things, what are the direct causes? I.e., is it age or is it fitness? Today on the Personalized Fitness Podcast. Good day and welcome to the Personalized Fitness Podcast. My name is Garrett Williamson. I'm president of Personalized Fitness. Thank you so much for joining us today for the podcast and starting a new series that actually I just came up with recently. I'm going to get into that. I'm going to tell you how to get in touch with the show and really I want to make sure you have this information because of the topic that we're going to cover and the series that we're starting today, which I'm not sure I see an end into it. But how to reach us is reach out to me at area code 251-278-3343. That's 251-278-EDGE. You can also reach me at Garrett, Garrett, at personalizedfitness.com. It's my email address and also our website. Personalized Fitness is our Facebook page. And you can also reach out to me on Twitter at TeamPE. Starting a new series today that in full disclosure, I just came up with this like an hour ago. I was thinking about a conversation I had yesterday with a longtime client who's going through some life changes. The details aren't relevant, but it got us into a conversation of that we've had for many years, and that is dealing with aging. And to know Garrett is to have a conversation about aging, or a conversation about water. Definitely one about fitness. But we were talking about aging and some of the really arguments that we've had about it, dealing with this whole ridiculous concept that time passing on a calendar causes deterioration. And you've heard me say this many times. I have a 5-part series on live aging, talking about what actually causes deterioration, and it's not time passing on a calendar. It's fitness, nutrition, lifestyle, and/or mindset, which are all 100% controllable. If you've seen me speak, do a live speaking event, most likely you've heard me speak on that topic. The two that I speak on a regular basis are live aging and live food. But what got me thinking about this and doing this series is I am shocked, actually. I'm shocked at the overwhelming evidence for what I'm talking about, and still I have the most difficult time breaking through with clients, with friends, with people in a speaking engagement, listeners, about there's overwhelming proof of what I'm saying. There's no proof, no scientific evidence whatsoever for the other side, and wondering why that doesn't resonate. And I think I know why. At least today, this is why I think it is. And that is that I look at the problem that I run into when I talk about the live age, and I talk about what actually causes deterioration. And I cite examples. I cite examples of how your knees go out, because we're standing up and sitting down wrong. I cite in nutrition. I talk about how we get protein out of a diet, how that actually occurs over time, that we start getting protein out of the diet, so therefore we cannot maintain muscle, which causes deterioration. I talk about the lifestyle changes that we go through, that everybody lives basically the same pattern. We're seeking retirement, we're seeking an ultimate slowdown. We stop certain activities, which causes deterioration. And then, of course, mindset. If you believe you're going to fail, it's been proven. There's a fantastic study that Harvard did, which was tremendous, on mindset and how just thinking things can actually cause physical problems, physical deterioration. But I realize in using all those examples, and those I barely touched on the examples that I talk about in the live age. So many times when I was speaking to people, I realized I didn't hit their example. I didn't cover what I call this listeners, but what about? Now I'm using that as one word, like us Southerners use "gg" yet as a one word. But what about? And the reason I say that is I just not so much that I hear that term, but I sense that term when somebody asks me a question in the audience when I'm giving the talk, and they'll ask me about an elbow or a shoulder or something I haven't talked about. And that's their, but what about? Yeah, I heard what you said about knees, but what about the shoulder? But what about the back? And I think I could stand there until the end of time giving examples and still would not cover everybody's but what about. So this series that I'm starting, I'm titling it Is It Age or, and fill in the blank. Is it age or is it? And I'm hoping that with the majority of my listeners that I will eventually cover your but what about? And hopefully get you to see where time is not causing deterioration. Deterioration is being caused by things that we are doing to ourselves. As I've talked about in the definition of age, things that spontaneously happen or they're actively acted upon. In other words, we actually do that. And I don't think spontaneity is what's causing deterioration. In fact, I know there's no proof that spontaneity is causing deterioration. So I thought today we'd start with some general topics, and we're going to get into some details as I do this series. And I'm planning on doing this at least once a month of Is It Age? And today is it age or is it, well, I'm a personal trainer. Is it age or is it fitness? And what I mean by that is, okay, think about things that seem to go away with time. Let's just pick some common problems. A knee failure, for example. You run it a long time, whatever, but eventually you've got to stop that when you get older because your knees go out, or you have knee replacements at later in life. So therefore, that says that age, time passing on a calendar, causes knee deterioration. No, it doesn't. I mean, I've done this in examples. It's very difficult to do if you're not seeing me in person to explain this to you. But if you think with me and you watch. The next time you're at a dinner or you're at a meeting or something, you watch everybody go to stand up. The majority of folks, almost everybody, is going to do the exact same thing. When they go to stand up out of a chair, out of a sitting position, they're going to take their heels, they're going to take their feet, and they're going to slide their feet back towards them. And then they're going to slightly lean over and stand up. Now, why is that important? Well, what they're doing, the reason they're moving their feet underneath them or back towards them is they're trying to get their feet underneath the weight, which is their body. And there's two ways of doing that. You can slide your feet underneath the weight, or you can place the weight over your feet. The improper way of doing it, which is the way the majority of us stand up and sit down, is we slide our feet back towards us. And what that's going to cause is as soon as you push forward to go stand up, you're going to push your knees over toes. I'm using that phrase because if you've ever worked out with a trainer, or you've done even some cursory views on YouTube of watching proper squat technique, that you've heard knees over toes. Knees over toes is bad. Knees over toes is bad. It's not so much the position of the knee being past the toe in direct concept, but the fact that once the knee goes over the toe, then when you push forward, all the pressure goes into the top part of your leg, and it pushes forward, forcing those two bones that join at your knee, forcing those to cause almost a shearing effect, where you're pushing that knee up, that top bone forward, while the tib fib is staying still, and so you're putting undue pressure on the knee joint. And doing that once, no big deal. Doing it twice, no big deal. Do it 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, and all of a sudden, your knee deteriorated because time passed on a calendar. Well, you can see that we're actually causing it ourselves. If you actually leave your feet and keep creating a 90-degree angle in your knee, and you lean your weight, basically place your chest on your legs with your head looking forward, your back in an arched position. You're going to put the weight over your feet, and you're going to be able to press through your heels, stand straight up without your knee going over or pushing that femur over the top of the tibia and fibia, therefore causing that undue stress on your knee. And that's where fitness is actually causing, incorrect fitness is actually causing the deterioration, not age, not time passing on the calendar. How about another one? And you can answer this question in your head. I do this when I do this in a speaking engagement. Every single time the audience responds with the correct answer. When you fall at 18, you get a bruise. When you fall at 81, you break a... Yes, you said hip. You said hip. I know you did. Why? Why is that? Well, it's because time passes on the calendar, Garrett. It's because, when you get older, your hips just go out. No, that's not true at all. I'll give you there's several examples I can give you about this, and go into nutrition, go into water, go into protein, go into activity. But I'm going to use a simple one. We stop moving sideways. And at a certain part of your time in your life, we stop moving sideways. I hate, most people would say a certain age we stop moving sideways. I'm careful using that because, age, well, there you go. You just proved it. Time caused it. No. Typically, we stop certain activities. If you're 60 years old, you're probably not playing a whole lot of tag. You've got to stop that. You've probably not pulling somebody's shirt tail out and then running away from them. We stop these activities. We stop playing basketball where you're doing lateral movement. Maybe playing tennis where you're doing lateral movement. All the way up until 2014, mass-produced cardio equipment, treadmills, ellipticals, stair steppers, whatever, bikes, everything created was a forward and backward movement. There was no lateral movement to it whatsoever. Now, there were some others that came out, some ski machines that weren't so popular or whatever, but not until 2014 when Octane came out with the Lateral X did we really have a mass-produced, heavily used cardio equipment that actually had lateral sideways movement. Well, why is that important? I'm going back to why do we break hips at 81 and not at 18? Well, when we stop that lateral movement, we degenerate the medial glute, which is on the outside of the hip, causing two things. By depleting that muscle, when we fall, which if you think about it, we put a microscope on falling past a certain age. How many times did I fall this year? You know exactly the number. But if you go back and you start in your 20s, you start when you're 4 years old, doesn't matter. And you go all the way through your life, you probably can't remember the times you fall. I didn't fall this much. Yeah, you didn't pay attention to it. We fall every year of our lives. I mean, the best athletes fall every year, trip on something, fall. We do that all the time. In fact, you fell a lot more when you were younger than when you were older. It just becomes hyper-focused because now you have a potential break in the hip because you've degenerated that muscle, which removes the cushion if you do fall. The muscle is there. One of the things it does, one main reason it's there is protect the bone. And one way it does that is actually cushions your falls. You end up getting a bruise. But if you have no muscle there, the pressure, the jarring, the impact is going to go straight onto the bone, and it's going to break the hip. Another way that degenerating that muscle causes you to break that hip is because if you go to fall, well, you're going to try to catch yourself. And one of the ways you're going to catch yourself is not with your hands. The first thing you're going to do is try to catch yourself with your legs. So if you get pushed sideways, you're going to quickly move your leg out to the side to catch yourself. Wow, I almost tripped. We do that all the time. We don't pay attention to it because it's so normal. Well, it becomes abnormal when we don't have that hip muscle to catch ourselves. Therefore, we can't move it fast enough. Therefore, we fall. So it's two ways that degenerating one muscle through lack of activity causes us to break our hip. The shoulder, having rotator cuff trouble. You have rotator cuff surgery when you're older, unless you're an athlete and you have this major injury or something. No, incidence of rotator cuff damage jumped. I mean, more than quadrupled when they came out with plastic bags over paper bags. Why? Well, the plastic bags have a handle on them. And many times if you're carrying your groceries or something into your house, you're going to try to load as many of those things up your arm as you possibly can and carry them into your house. And you're probably, once you have your elbows by your side and you've got your arm in a 90 degree and you've got those bags hanging on your arm, well, that's a function mostly of your bicep. And a bicep, excuse me, with a P, not a T. And so as you load those bags on, you can feel how heavy it's getting. You can still feel how much the bicep can handle, and you're fine. When you go to put them on your counter, or you go just to pull them out of your trunk, if you remember, trunks before plastic bags were so prevalent, had a wall. When you closed the top was flat. It didn't have that wall piece that also came down. There was a wall that you had to lift bags up and out of. If you think about an old boxy Volvo, the trunk top was just a flat top. And when people would load those bags up in the arm, their bicep handled it just fine, but they went to go and lift it up over that wall. Or if you're going to lift them up to put them on a counter, now you start moving your elbow away from your body, which now puts the pressure not just on the bicep, but puts all that weight on the rotator cuff, which is not meant to handle that kind of stress. And therefore, pull that rotator cuff. Or maybe it's not just a sudden injury. Maybe it's, instead of carrying 6 bags, which would cause an injury, you do only 2 or 3 bags, but you do 2 or 3 bags every time you go to the grocery store. You're going to start causing slight tears to that rotator cuff. You can eventually cause damage to it. And that's why we end up having surgeries or locked shoulders. There's so many people. I've had a gentleman come in one time and tell me that he hurt his shoulder reaching back for something in his car, and he solved that problem. He just doesn't reach that way anymore. And I had him sit in the office, and he was sitting in a chair in front of me, and I said, "Do a favor for me." No weight in his hands whatsoever. I said, "Put your arms up over your head." And when he reached up, one of his arms could not go all the way up, and as high as it would go to a certain point, and then he would jut his shoulder like he's bringing his shoulder up to his ear, because he'd lost the flexibility in his shoulder because he had developed a frozen shoulder due to inactivity. I stopped doing that. Isn't that good? No. Stop doing it when you don't use it, and you just finished my statement right there. You lose it. So it's not time passing on a calendar that causes those things. It's the exercises. And I'm using fitness and using exercise in a unique way here by saying that, carrying grocery bags is a form of exercise. But yes, it's an activity. And by doing those activities, you can cause this damage, intentionally cause this damage that we attribute to time passing on a calendar. Lower backs, same situation. I didn't have back problems when I was younger, but when I got older, my back I started getting a bad back. Just happens. Time passed on the calendar. It just occurs. You'll have physicians tell you that, well, you're Mr. Johnson, you're older, therefore you have a bad back. Please ask that physician. Show me a study. Show me a study that proves that time passing on a calendar causes this to happen. And if they can tell you that actually happens, ask them at what age it happens to everybody. And there better not be well, it depends. Because if it depends, when you ask them what it depends on, I promise you, they're going to give you an example that deals with fitness, nutrition, lifestyle, or mindset. It depends on the person. It depends on, what does it depend on? Well, it depends on how much exercise they do, fitness. Well, it depends on whether or not they've got enough protein in the diet, nutrition. Well, it depends on whether or not they've stopped doing exercises and then they went and lifted something heavy, lifestyle. I mean, it's. I'm sorry, I got on my soapbox on that because I think it's absurd. I think it's absurd that we attribute these things to time passing on a calendar when, in this case, it's fitness or lack thereof. It can also be not just lack thereof, but an overuse. Something I hear commonly, and that is that you can't run all the time. And I hear this from lifelong runners. And because they were a lifelong runner, they feel like they're an authority to say, well, when you get to a certain point, you can't run anymore because your knees go bad. I know that. I'm a lifelong runner. All my friends that are lifelong runners have the same problem. Case closed. We've proven that your knees just go out as time passes on the calendar. No. What is also common about most runners, and by the way, I'm a runner myself, nothing to the level that the runners that I'm talking about are. I celebrate what they do. I think it's fantastic. I know that the majority of them majority of endurance athletes and endurance enthusiasts, sport enthusiasts like cyclists, like swimmers, like runners. They do this as much for their head as they do it for their body. I understand that. It's a stress relief. I think it's great. My addiction happens to be swimming. Cycling's in there. Running's in there. Walking's in there. But I understand that. I'm a big fan of it. But something that is inherent, that is very common amongst avid runners, is they do no resistance training for their legs. Most of them do no resistance training at all, but they do no resistance training for the legs, mainly justifying by the fact I run so I don't have to do legs. No! By far the complete opposite. You run so you should be working legs. So they're not strengthening the muscles that are protecting that joint, protecting the knee joint, protecting the ankles, protecting the hip. They're not doing these exercises. And by not doing these exercises, not only are they not protecting that hip or they're protecting that knee, they're actually causing damage to that knee. If you get tight hips, remember what I've said about strength training, the stronger the muscle is, the more flexible it is. So if you're weak, it's going to be tight. Therefore, it's going to end up pulling on the knee joint. Just like a weak hamstring is going to pull on the knee joint. Everybody knows a weak quadricep is going to keep the knee from being protected. Therefore, after they've atrophied and atrophied and atrophied and atrophied, and then, not first and foremost, because people talk about the pounding from running, but the pounding, quote unquote, from running, we don't ever worry about that when we're teaching a baby to run. We don't worry about pounding at that point in time. Why is the quote unquote pounding so bad? Well, it's because there's no shock absorption in the body because the muscles are atrophied. The muscles are there to handle the quote unquote pounding. This is why Zola Budd could run barefoot. Doesn't need a Hoka. I'm a big fan of Hokas, like Hokas very much. On Cloud, any kind of shoe that gives a major cushioning, she didn't need that. Wow, she has strong muscles. And that's what is there. That is what is there to protect the knee. This is why you can be a lifelong runner if you do the strength training associated with it. Again, knees going out, not because time passes on the calendar, but it's because of fitness. In one case, overuse of a joint that is not being trained properly. Trained properly, you could keep that quote-unquote overuse. You could do those miles upon miles upon miles if you're doing the right training. So one aspect of the fitness is overuse. Second aspect of the fitness is is inactivity, and that is in the strength training. Now, I'm watching my time here because I literally be going for days on this. But just to tell you a little bit more about this series, we're starting today with fitness. I'm going to go through all four of the concepts: nutrition, lifestyle, mindset, and then I'm going to. This is the reason I say I could go on forever with this series of is it age, but I'm gonna hit smaller aspects of each one. I'm going to go deeper into each one of them. Is it age or is it the squat? Is it age or is it water? Is it age or is it protein? Is it age or is it your recliner? I mean, I'm going to go into all these hoping that I hit your personal, but what about? And if you have a but what about, please, by all means, reach out to me. Won't pick on you. I won't use your name if you don't want me to. When somebody comes up with a lot of people don't ask the but what abouts, they're afraid that I'm going to try to embarrass them. Definitely not. The reason I started this podcast is written in the subtitle, the Personalized Fitness Podcast, Dispelling the Myths of Health, Fitness, and Wellness. And your but what about or your question that you don't want to ask most likely is wrapped up in the myths of health, fitness, and wellness. If nothing else, it's a myth to you. It's a lack of understanding to you. More than glad to answer that question. Please contact me at area code 251-278 888-3343. That's 251-278-EDGE. You can also reach me at Garrett, Garrett, at personaledgefitness.com. That is also our website and our Facebook page. Hit me up on Twitter at TeamPE. If you have any questions dealing with, is it age? Or could it be something else? Because driving this point home, getting everybody to understand that you're in full control. You're in full control of your ability. They're basically, we don't, would I say that we can live forever? I don't know. But I tell you what, nobody knows how long we can live and what quality of life you can have. Because increasing your quality of life is, well, that's one more way we help you reach your level of wellness. Thank you so much for joining me today. Stay tuned. A lot more to come.